All right, so the Oscars happened and everyone's in a tiff. Let's go over it. Hello, welcome to the HolmFront. Today's a little bit different, obviously. So we're making do with a virtual session. That's the change in scenery for one of us at least. To my right, as always, is Mitch, my relay artistic friend, and I'm obviously Tyler, your host. And so we watched the Oscars, and what a night it was.
Am I actually on your right?
No, you're. It depends on how you're looking at it, I suppose. This is all very strange.
It's all very subjective.
I made sure that you were on the same side that you always are on. So you
Okay,
technically,
I'll
like
take that.
as I'm looking at it, you are on my left. You're on the square, the left hand side. So
Okay.
so here we are. Well, okay, so let's do this first. What was your biggest takeaway of the Oscars?
Like my favorite takeaway?
Sure.
Uh, it was probably predicting that Mikey Madison would win Best Actress and that Sean Baker would win Best Editing. It's either that or just the fact that Anora won because that was like my number two pick of everything on the ballot. It was my number one pick, to be perfectly frank. So I came out feeling pretty good. In fact, I feel like I didn't check, but this best picture win is like for a movie that I actually really enjoyed, and I don't think I could say that for any of the films that I've won in the past like 15 or 20 years. Like I don't know that not since like Return of the King have I been like, yeah, like I'm excited for this movie to win. I didn't even see that one win. Um, I mean, there's probably like something in there I'm forgetting, but even something like Oppenheimer was good. I enjoyed the movie, but I wasn't like passionate about it and wasn't a very exciting win because I just knew it was going to. Everybody knew it. It was the most obvious win ever. So with Nora, it
I
was
don't know. It had
like a little
Barbie.
bit
You
shaky
know,
ground, so it was more exciting. Yeah,
it had some
sure.
competition that year. The Barbenheimer effect or whatever it was. Okay. So
What about you?
um good question. This is actually the first time I've ever watched the Oscars. Like
Like ever?
never seen it. It's the first time. Mostly because I just find it mostly to be a joke. Most of the films that I hear that win, I'm like, what? How did that one? Because you always get like the controversial takes and the political talking points. And my
Mm,
favorite one, because I hate this movie, and we're gonna go over this at some point, is The Shape of Water winning. And I was like, the fact that
yeah.
that made it on the list at all is like that was just kind of like I was just like, I'm not interested in watching this ever. So I just never did. Um,
Well, that's interesting because you typically like Guillermo del Toro,
I
so it
do.
was interesting that you went in with, like, high hopes and then he crushed them, and there was no recovering.
It wasn't even a crushing. It was a series of awkward events. I took my sister to go see it because I was like, "El Toro, he's fine, right?" And then you get into some of those scenes, and I was like, "This is not what I wanted to take my sister to go see." So I ended up going later to watch it because we walked out. I was like, "This is not a comfortable scenario." So I came back and I watched it alone, and it remained a terrible movie throughout the whole thing. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I heard
See.
that it made it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did this happen?" Um, so yeah, I mean, my opinion was a little bit biased. And then you had, the external factors, which I think we're going to touch on a little bit. We try to keep this show as apolitical as possible. There are some times where it's hard to avoid, but I do acknowledge that the Oscars over the past couple of years specifically have gotten more and more political in their statements and their speeches. I was like, I'm not really interested in hearing anyone's political opinion at these rallies.
Well,
Like,
how would you know that if you don't watch the Oscars, though?
oh, you hear the news. I hear the political commentators that I've heard, and they'll bring it up, and I have to hear everything that they have to say about it, which is not my favorite.
I don't know that it's more. I mean, I watch it pretty frequently. I don't think it's like they're super, political now as opposed to, like, any more than they were before.
Maybe it's
I
not a
mean, if they were,
comparison
like,
thing. It's
truly political
It's
Oh,
more
go
of
ahead.
just like I don't care in general. So I don't want to go on and watch a
Okay.
movie award system, which is already Hollywood patting itself on the back. So it's kind of like, you got to get past that hurdle. And then the fact that they go up there and make a political statement, which typically I will disagree with. So I'm like, I'll just pay attention to who wins, and we'll move on from there. I
Well,
w-
I had fun.
it wasn't terrible. I mean, it's long. It's probably way too long, especially with the commercial breaks that they throw in there constantly. I'm like, dude, don't just
Yeah, way too many
get them
commercial
out.
breaks.
Especially with with uh the 10 in the category at the end, the best film, best picture. I
Mm,
think I
mhm.
still like our options better of just chopping it down to 5, like everything else,
Yeah,
and
agreed.
then Dune should have won, which is what I came away with, is that Dune still should have won. Just got way snubbed.
The snub was really felt too because when Dune did win, there was his crew, repeatedly mentioned Denis Villeneuve as "Oh, he's a great
Yep.
director." Just try to to propel the message out to everybody in the room, "Hey," in a nice way, "Hey,
You
he
did
was
wrong.
cool. It would've been nice if he was up for best director."
After all
They
this
kept kind
time.
of saying that, and then they would, play the music and usher them off, they did that to the sound team, the one guy didn't even get a chance to say anything. They were up for, 20 seconds, and they were like, "You're done."
Yeah, there
Sheesh.
was 3 of
You
them,
think you
and
can have
2
more
of
than
them
20 seconds.
2 of them spoke, and then they're like, "Get that other guy out of here. No, go, leave. Be done." I was like, okay. Jeez, that was messed up. All right." Yeah,
Yeah, that is something I don't like about the Oscars is I don't like how it's some of the emphasis, which we'll talk about as we get into, but some of the emphasis is on things that I don't care about and I don't think is important. And there's things that is very clearly important to cover that they will rush through. And that's one of them is just
sure.
if you're in a low tier technical category, whatever. And then we just usher you off the stage. And I don't
Everyone
really like
wants to hear Adrian and Mikey. Get out of here, stupid sound guy. Which I will
that.
say that was the other thing is Adrian Brody, way too long in the speech, bro. Way too long.
I heard that he had given the longest speech in Oscar history.
Really? That's doesn't
I heard
surprise
it's
me.
5 minutes long or something. It's so long. It was
It
ridiculous.
was really uncomfortable too, because he basically said everything in the outset, and then they start to
Uh-huh.
play the music, and he's like, "No, no, 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 pause the music. I've done this before. I'm gonna finish what I have to say." And then he basically repeats himself, and I was like,
Yeah,
you kind of said
it's
all this.
weird.
Yeah. What are you doing? I really should. I mean,
He
yeah. Regardless of whether you agreed with what he had to say or not, was like this felt uncomfortable for everybody. I think overstayed is welcome.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway I think that everyone can agree with is, if his speech was well prepared and he had something specific that he wanted to say and
Right.
he was, making that point and then the music came on and he told the music to shush, "I'm almost done, I promise." And then they stopped and then he finished what he was saying and then walked off stage. That would have been fine. But instead, he kind of rambled for a bit. They started playing music, and then he goes, "Well, stop the music. I'm not finished. I'll be quick, I promise." He made it
Then
sound like he had
proceeds
something
to
really
not
important
be
to
quick at
deliver,
all.
and then it's just more rambling. You're right. It's just totally a repeat, and you're sitting there going, What's the revelation that I'm supposed to get from this?" And there isn't one.
Nope.
So I can't believe he did not prepare a speech, or maybe he just
He thought he
I
had it
can't imagine him
memorized,
being too
maybe.
nervous because he'd already won before, as he said in his own words.
No, I think he probably just didn't have it as memorized as he thought he did, or maybe he thought he was going to actually lose to Timothy. I mean,
I feel like if you're winning Best Actor, you would have your lines memorized.
you'd think. I mean, that is
It's
like
part of your
most of his
job. It's
job.
like
Yeah. And then they're lines that he wrote. They're not even lines that someone handed him. It's like he put these together. So
right.
you'd think he'd remember it better. I mean, whatever. Regardless, that was one awkward moment. The other one was the dude and his wife. I forget, it was like the animated film or something where she goes up and proceeds to start the speech, picks up her phone and starts to read, and then the husband is like, "No, no, no, it's my turn." He pulled it out of her hand and he started reading the phone. Basically repeated
Oh
all hers.
yeah,
It
they were kind
was
of
real awkward.
I thought they were kinda cute how they were, in conflict on the stage of who has to speak and who can speak, and they were dealing with, a language barrier and stuff, so I thought that was a sweet moment, actually. The one I thought was probably the worst, though, was when Emilia Perez won Best Song, and they went up there, and they started singing the song
Oh my
and just got
gosh.
like, like, the
It
El
was the
Mall song.
songwriter.
Yeah, the
Yes.
songwriter did. But the thing is Jock Odiar, the director, he actually went up there with him and got an Oscar because I guess he helped write it or contribute or produce it or something. So he was there and he never got a chance to say anything. And that
Thank
was his only
goodness.
chance
Oh,
to go up and say something. And they cut him off by singing a song that no one really cares about. Because I mean, I get that it's winning, but I'm also like, if you win, it's not like every single voter voted for you. That's not really how it works. There's so many like plausible outcomes for why you won and how much support you actually have. So like you won, but let's not get carried away here.
that moment was so weird. That person was clearly, maybe not clearly, looked insane. Just starts like, it was so weird going up there and just, it wasn't a speech. It was just kind of like she threw a couple of sentences in and then she started singing the song and everyone's like, what are we doing? I just, it was odd. It was just
You're feeling
very,
a very different energy than everybody else.
maybe.
Especially like the whole ceremony opened with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande singing. And, like,
Yeah,
you're
Ariana,
gonna go up and sing?
yeah,
Like, you want
please
that
no, please.
comparison?
Please no.
What?
Yeah, because Ariana Grande sings "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" in homage to Oz, which is obviously what Wicked's
Mhm.
a prequel to. And then Cynthia sang "Defying Gravity," I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I think so.
And both are incredibly, incredibly talented vocalists. And
Right.
so, yeah, for this writer to go up and start, it was just weird. It was like, it's like the weird aunt that you have that in the middle of a conversation just starts
Yeah.
singing or what humming, and you're like, "Oh, I guess we're done talking. This is nice." I didn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the nice thing that came out of that was that we didn't have to hear Jacques say anything, so I'll take the good with the bad.
I feel like I would prefer Jacques over their singing, but to each their own, I suppose.
Yeah.
Pick your poison,
I got I know the poison I got, so I don't know the one I didn't get, and I'm okay with not figuring it out. I know it should anyway. Okay, so obviously we come to the fact now that Sean Baker has made history with his film Anora,
Yeah.
which funny enough was equated to a Disney film. Who's the person that he won up to that night? Was it Walt Disney won how many? He won 4 in a night for
Yeah, he
producing
won 4
films?
Oscars in a single night. I think it was mostly producing, but I don't quite remember exactly
Okay.
what his role was on each project, but it was 4 different projects, if I remember right. There was, like, an animated short win, an animated feature win, a whole bunch of stuff like that. So he had different projects that year. Makes sense. But, like, this one I think is, like, harder because it's like he won everything for the one film.
He also
And that's
did
why I
everything
said
in
in
the
our
one
previous
film.
but pretty much, yeah. Like, and that's what I said in our episode before. I was like, Mikey Madison has to win because otherwise it's just him. Are they just gonna give him 4 Oscars and call it a night? That seems weird. But then at the same time, I was like, I don't think they'll give him 4 because that's history. I mean, the chance of that happening is so low, but it happened. So I should have stuck with my gut on that one. I should have just been like, you know what? It doesn't make sense, but I'm calling it history is happening and that would have been probably more exciting. But I was really happy, nevertheless, with the editing win because everyone was divided on that one. I think no one really had a clear take of what was going to happen. I think most people were thinking Conclave because they figured maybe Conclave gets or adapted screenplay editing and then picture possibly, and they felt like that was a real chance. But no, it was too milk toast. Called it.
Which is fair. It is too milquetoast. It's too basic. Didn't have enough originality. It didn't have enough there to really make it as unique as it could have been. I'll call it.
Yeah, I was actually like talking with some people online, and the thing with that movie is it's like it's a interesting reflection of, like, our current times, but it's only that way in spite of itself. Like, it's not a rewarding watch in and of itself. That's why Dune was such a better choice because Dune was, like, a great watch just no matter when you see it, but it's also interestingly, reflective of our current times and things that are going on. So, it's like you'd think they would go with that, but, Conclave doesn't do that because the story just falls apart in that last act. So, it's like you'd have to know the context, which is, I think, a bit annoying. I
Do you
think I think a Best Picture should do both if it can.
do you think? I mean, considering that Dune is what 80 years old at this point. No, it's more like 60. I think it was in 60s that it was written. But it
Mhm.
had commentary that obviously has lasted this long because it's a message that transcends the time in which it was written. Therefore, it should automatic. But I mean, at the same time, back then they didn't get the message right away either. So do you think that this crowd understood the message of Dune that, is not just applicable to this time on a on the nose type of way?
Um,
Because Conclave is
I
super on
think
the
there's
nose.
definitely an yeah, it was.
My
I
gosh.
definitely think there were a number of Oscar people who just did not give it a fair shake. I was, like, looking up to some of the voters, like, admitting, like, having not seen it or not having any interest. Tarantino was actually one of them, and he kinda lost a little respect for me. He was just like, "I don't need to see it again because, I've already seen the David Lynch one." I'm like he's just like, "It's just another remake, it's just another sequel." I'm like, "This is, like, a really dismissive take, man."
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the whole thing is if if he's in the Oscars, and I assume that he was been invited because he did win a screenplay with Pulp Fiction, and I mean Tarantino's name is pretty well recognized. So like, I mean, you typically get invited when you win, I think, or at least your body of work is enough, or someone sponsors you. Those are like the pathways to getting there, and I can't imagine him not being given an offer at this point. That seems crazy. So the fact that it's like if he was voting, and so I mean, I don't know if he's a part of it or not. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he rejected it or something. But like if he was voting, I'd be like, dude, you have to watch it. It doesn't really matter what you feel. And then some people were others were saying like how they were like just like bored and like disinterested or whatever. I mean, like the lack of enthusiasm for sci-fi is just so strange to me.
Weird.
And I just I don't know because I can do it. You can do it. Like we watched, other movies like September 5th, for example, that we thought was great. We would have put down for lots of things. That's a very Oscar baity, just like tell the story straight, just something important in life. There you go. But like the lack of imagination, and it's like this is the same crowd who's just like, oh, Wicked, I just don't understand it. I don't understand how Wicked can get 10 and then Dune 2 gets 5. You're just like, "How?" So, yeah, there's something funky going on.
I mean, yeah, we even said, like, for the ones that we didn't see, we can't comment on. But that doesn't mean that they're not good automatically. It just means that we don't have an opinion because we've not seen it. And there's only one.
And we're not Oscar voters, so we don't have to see
This,
everything.
this is there's that too.
But if I was a voter, I you bet I'd see the whole thing, all of it. I'd watch it all.
Sure.
And if I felt like I wasn't, like, really ingesting one, I might give it a rewatch. If I had the time, I'd be like because I wanna make sure whatever.
Dune got snubbed ultimately. So, yeah. Any other takeaways that you want to go over before we push over?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I think yeah, what else do you wanna cover from it?
I will say that this is totally aside from any of the points that we want to make here. This is just kind of like a petty remark, I guess we'll call it. But the some of it, not all of it, but some of this ceremony looked like something out of the Hunger Games. It was just the styles were just bizarre. And I don't know if we're allowed to say, but like Cynthia Erivo and her like 6-inch dagger nails, and
Ugh, the
it
claws
was odd. It was real
is
weird.
freaky. It's like, "Whoa," like,
Yeah,
you're
some
gonna, like, cut somebody with those, like,
yeah, it looks like it's just like for digging a heart out. You just like shove it in. And just, ah. Anyway, real weird. Um, another.
Well, there was a lot of that. Who was that woman? There was someone singing, and she was in this dress, and you said it looked like she was, like, just crawled out of a spider web, like
Yeah,
she
it
was
was.
Frodo from Lord of the Rings or something?
I think it was Pink. I went up and looked. I think that was Pink, the singer, the pop
Okay,
star. She was wearing a dress. I think it was made entirely of diamonds or something along those lines because it was a tribute to James Bond, and they were singing
okay.
one of the Bond songs, "Diamonds Last Forever" or something like that. But yes, it looked like Frodo after he gets all wrapped up and he cuts himself out. Is He's just all covered in spider webs. Yeah,
That was an odd
it was
choice.
a bizarre choice. But
I wanna say something about that James Bond thing too. That's something I would have cut. On the one hand, I think it's funny that we always have to have James Bond tributes. It's like all the time, and there's not even a reason. They were just like, "Let's do random James Bond tribute." But, like so it's kind of humorous to me, but at the same time, I'm like, I would have preferred you spent more time on the memoriam. Like, I felt like David Lynch could have done with, like a 30-second speech or something. And actually, Isabella Rossellini, she was in Blue Velvet, which is a movie that David Lynch directed, and she was wearing blue velvet, someone pointed out, and I was like, "That's so cool." Like, so she was clearly thinking about Lynch,
Hmm.
but I mean, they should have asked her, like, "Do you wanna say something?" Or get someone to say something. Because I thought that was really cool that she was, like, kind of, like, in tribute to the movie she had worked on with him.
I
So,
saw,
yeah, I don't know. I felt like Lynch is just, like, such a like, people know his name, even if you've not seen his movies, you're familiar with the name,
yeah.
and it just seems like kind of a shame that they didn't talk more about him, say a little something him and maybe Donald Sutherland. Like, I get Donald Sutherland never won an Oscar either, but, like, Donald Sutherland's pretty well known as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I thought I saw a list of there was like 6 or 7, and I can't remember them at the moment. I'll have to pull it up later. But there was like 6 or 7 other people that had died that were totally not in that memoriam. Like it wasn't a part of that. So I was like, well, why were some of these people important and these other ones weren't? But yeah, I mean stuff
Was it
like
because it
that.
was recent or,
No, it was in the year. It
like
was people that would
oh,
have been included.
weird.
But yeah, again, strange. I mean, those are all things that we don't fully understand. So I mean, maybe there's a reason for all that, but regardless of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so um let's jump into where you were incorrect. How about that? Let's just start there. Which ones did you miss?
Okay, so I missed both screenplays, adapted and original, and then I missed animated feature. Animated feature went to Flow, and
Right.
I don't feel bad about missing that one because it was like there was Flow and there was Wallace and Gromit and there was Wild Robot. I thought were like the top 3. Or in, like, Inside Out, which that was in there as well. So, I was like, "Okay, I've gotten this category wrong before," and when I got it wrong, it was because I went with, like, the too safe pick, something that was just really conventional, like a Pixar movie. But I've also gotten it wrong by not going for the movie that was really, like, out there, like a foreign film or, like, one that was kinda shorter or just more unique visual style. So I said, let's just cut the difference. I'll go with Wild Robot because that's sort of in the middle between like Inside Out and Flow. So that I just thought it would deviate to that point, and instead they went in on Flow. So good for Flow. That movie did seem way more interesting. It's just there's no dialogue. You just follow a cat, and it's like this flood that comes in and destroys everything. The cat's like trying to survive or whatever. So, yeah, I forget which I think it was Latvia or something. I think that was the country who
Don't remember.
don't quote I don't
Yeah,
remember what that
don't remember.
who it was, but yeah, good for them. Glad to see them win. And then the as for the screenplay ones, yeah, so I guess I really should have just gone with Sean Banker for, original screenplay. I thought it deserved it. That's what I would have voted for. I was like, how does he win 4 Oscars? It just seems insane. Like, it's never happened before. Like, does that happen? And so you're just,
Watch me.
you hesitate, so I took a back step there when I should have just committed all in. And then for adapted screenplay, it went to Conclave. Um, yeah, and everybody, it was, there's some people were just like, did you really think it would been, what's it called? Um, what did I even predict? Nickel Poise or whatever. And this kind of bit me in the butt because it's generally, I think, not a good idea to predict something you've not seen. Just doesn't end well typically because I predicted like Elvis once or twice,
Mm.
or for like 2 categories last time, and I lost that. And if I had seen Elvis, I don't think I would have predicted. I would have been like, "No, this isn't their movie. It's just lucky to be there, and everybody else is wrong." I think I would have felt more assertive. So this was another reminder of that happening. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to step outside your comfort zone. I mean, nobody thought Sean Baker would get editing. And what was the other? Oh yeah, there was a lot of detractors against Mikey Madison. A lot of people thought it would be Demi Moore. They were just so convinced of the her Demi having the better narrative. She's like, sure, she does, but it's not the best performance. So like, I think and it's really funny how people are, like, annoyed about that Mikey Madison win. Like, they're talking about how it's like, "Oh, it's like, Demi was snubbed, it should have gone to her," and all this stuff. And I'm like, "But aren't you the same people who say, like, well, they never award the one that deserves it, they don't base it on merit, they just go for, like, a career win?" That was Demi. she was the career win person the whole time. Like freaking Mikey Madison, like put forth some effort. I was actually not to say that Demi didn't, but like her performance was so much like smaller to me. She has like half the amount of screen time. She's sharing it with a co-star. It's in a horror picture. It's like there's a lot of detracting stuff in here. It's just not. And you look over Mikey Madison, and like apparently she when she got her accent down, she said she had to like fine tune it, and she says you can notice throughout the film like when it's thicker and when it's not, depending on how comfortable the character is. She also like studied Russian. She also learned pole dancing just for one shot in the movie. Like that's some real dedication for an actor. So yeah, don't give me this like whatever. Like Mikey Madison deserved that Oscar. Good for her.
Fair
I
enough.
was right, you were wrong. I love how you asked about what I got wrong, and I just turned around about what
I
I got
know. You're
right.
like, ah, we're gonna talk about Anora again.
I mean, do you want me to say anything else about my errors, my blunderous ways?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're gonna let you go from the show. Just, I thought you were my
Okay.
magic card here, but you know, you're
Did
unreliable
you
at
bet real
best.
money?
Yeah, yeah, kind of. We'll talk about that afterwards. But okay, so on that, did you have anything else you wanted to cover over your failures in life? We can
No, I mean, I didn't
open it up
predict
all
the
now.
documentary shorts or
We didn't
the
even
live ac
care.
I
Yeah.
and people get annoyed, but, like, whatever. It's like they're impossible to predict. I haven't seen him. I never watch him, so it's just like I'm just gonna take a guess or go with the trend. It's like,
Right.
what's the point of documenting that? I think it's meaningless, so, yeah, whatever.
I mean, I'm glad that they're there for some small measure, but I mean, it depends on what it is, and
Well, the categories are fine. It's
yeah.
just to predict him is, like, impossible,
Well,
so I don't
that's
feel like
not why
it's
anybody
worth doing.
watches it, so there's that too. Um,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's jump into the Amelia Perez debacle then. So,
Okay.
initially, we kind of glossed over this, but obviously, Amelia Perez had a whole bunch of attention it did not deserve. Um, and then I'm gonna have you actually shift to your, if your point, to your right. Oh, I guess you can move the camera too. Whatever. A little bit more. You're on the edge of your little square. Okay, cool. That'll
Edge
work.
of my square.
You're good there. Uh,
Okay.
okay. So Amelia Perez, 13 nominations.
Yeah,
We
it
talked
sucked.
about the potential inflations, but then we went and watched it. Then talked about how this did not deserve any of this at all. The artistic merit was almost non-existent. Um, and then there was a debacle about some old tweets that the main actor, actress, whatever, wherever you line up there, had sent. I don't know when these were sent, how old they are, but they got unearthed, and there was a real debate on how much that was going to affect the film. We didn't know. And then we watched the Oscars. Boy, I think it won the song, and then why am I
Zoe
Zoe
Saldana.
Saldana won hers.
That's it, just the 2.
Which, to be fair, um I don't agree with the song. Zoe Saldana is a caliber of actress that deserves an award. I just don't think that this was the role to place that. And we had this discussion. See our Oscar
Yeah,
predictions if you're curious. I'm glad that she got one, but this is not the role I would have given it to her for. But in
that's where most of us are at
else,
with it, yeah.
everything else, they just totally snubbed this film. So my assumption is that probably these tweets hurt it a lot more than they should have. Um, again, our opinion is that that film shouldn't have been there in the first place, but then it was there, and now you have to evaluate how much an external influence or an external, separating the art from the artist, the art from what has happened outside with the artist. This
Mm.
apparently had a big impact. People cared a lot more about what this person had said outside the film than evaluating the film on its merits itself. And I disagree with that. So I mean, I kind of disagree with everything
So you
surrounding this film
yes,
altogether.
you had
Like
to defend Amelia Perez.
unbelievable. But we stand on principle here, okay? So I dislike that. I remember I talked to a buddy of mine earlier, and this is a bit of an aside, but anecdote that has to do with it, was that I was like, "Hey, what do you think about?" And this is what I sent you too. What do you think about the new Harry Potter TV show that they're announcing? And I was like, "Are you a fan of Harry Potter?" And he's like, "I hate the author." Like, yeah, blah blah blah. And I was like, "Okay, well, I didn't ask about the author. What do you think about Harry Potter?" He's like, "They're all right." And I was like, "Why don't we start there?" But like the fact that this person and his disagreement with the author was so affecting his enjoyment of the creation was like, man, you can like what they wrote and not like the person. It just there's too much intersection there, and I understand why. Like on some level, I can see why that would happen. There's some people on principle that I just won't engage with, Ryan Johnson. But I won't say that what he made was bad. I don't know if Glass Onion and the other film are good or bad. They might be good. They seem to be well received, but I just don't want to support the guy. I don't like him. Again, though, that doesn't mean that the art is bad.
You don't like his work is the thing.
I don't like what he did with a certain piece of work. I like Looper. I probably would enjoy Glass Onion or whatever the first one is, Knives Out.
Mm.
Um, but I don't want to support him. I don't think that he should be making movies with the statement he made. But that's a personal opinion and not whether the actual art that he made was good or not. But that's,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, I see where you're at with that. I mean, I don't really see it as support that very much unless I'm like actually paying real like hard money that's gonna reflect something. Like if a movie comes out opening weekend and I go to see it opening weekend,
Sure.
that's supporting that movie because that's like a hard adding to a hard statistic that they can see. But if I like watch a movie on like, a subscription service, it's like I don't think it really matters that much. I mean, I guess they see that I watched it in the data, but
A
that's
view
like
is a
so
view.
low of a bar. You know what I
But
mean? Yeah, I don't know.
all that to say, I mean, the Amelia Perez thing seemed to affect that crowd well enough to where they basically just said, "I don't care how many nominations we handed this thing, it's not getting any of them." Like I said, Zoe
Yeah, well,
Saldana, but that's it. Sorry.
I feel like part of what happened was so I don't think it was actually that damaging to it. I think it was bound to get this result pretty much regardless. The only category I think it genuinely hurt its chances was best international feature.
Mm.
If you walk in as an international picture with 13 nominations, you're getting international feature. And I'm Still Here had like 3. So no, there was no way that was supposed to happen.
Also, I'm Still
But,
Here had a bigger audience. People liked it more
it
than
had a huge audience. Yeah, the Brazilian crowd was just like they just stormed and they had so much enthusiasm and energy over that movie. So I think, and international feature 2 is selected by it's like a group of committee members or something like that. Because I mean, there's no branch for international feature. That doesn't make any sense. It's not a category that's a specific skill. So it's just kind of, you got to find whoever to they get to select those movies. So a lot of Oscar voters weren't probably aware of the movie. Some of the actors were because of Fernando Torres, and it was probably those same people who put it up for Best Picture. So that's it. Like they saw the movie, very few others did. And then when they saw that it was up for Best Picture, then they went and watched it. And when they saw it, they felt no justification to go with Emilia Perez over I'm Still Here. So it was just a very easy like swoop in and grab that movie. But yeah, other than that, I genuinely don't think Emily Price would have won more. It's such a like just as a film, like aesthetically, it really doesn't do a whole lot, and it's not very showy. Like it's not like Chicago. Like Chicago was like a big, like it had lots of set pieces and stuff. And same with like Wicked, where it's like this like big musical. Like they like musicals that have some like oomph behind them. And Emilia Perez was just like well, here's Selena Gomez singing a song in her pajamas in a black room, just that's just all dark with like some guys in the background. Like, that doesn't really give you a whole lot. It's like it in their eyes it was good, but like that's not enough to like vote in as like the best effort. That's a hard that's like you know. I think Zoe Saldana pulls ahead because she has to do a lot of like dancing and singing. So she has to
There
like,
was a lot of
you know,
choreography in that specific song that they
yeah.
that they recognized.
Yeah, and plus she's like pretty much the main character. Like, she could very easily have been considered as a leading actress on that movie. So the fact that she was up in supporting actress, that really helps them. I sometimes that doesn't matter for the Oscars, but I feel like in recent memory, like the last like 40-ish years, it seems to help you more when you're have a lot of extra screen time as a supporting actor. Whereas like in the past, you could have gotten away with winning with like a very short runtime in the movie, but and people have different opinions about that one. Yeah, do you feel like it was like how much did you expect Amelia Perez to actually win um before the debacle?
Um, it's a good question. I don't know because it's the nature of the film in general. Like I thought would have kept it from getting there in the first place. And again, I look at stuff like Shape of Water winning, and I'm like, how? What puts these things? What is going through these people's minds that allows these things to make it? So I don't know. I think potentially it could have been the same. I'll acknowledge that. That potentially it could have had the same outcome, considering the fact that once it made it in there, then everybody watched it and were like, "What is this doing here?" And maybe again, this is not where I would have handed Zoe Saldana her award. Like this is, I would have been like, "Yeah, she deserves it for X, Y, and Z," but I don't think she stood out necessarily here, and she didn't have the chance to. To be fair, it was a pretty underwhelming character in an underwhelming film with an underwhelming story. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, and that's a little too speculative for me to figure out. I do think that there's too many instances, or there seems to be too much evidence of external factors, and we'll call them hot political takes that seem to affect an opinion of certain pieces. So that's why I just assumed that that was the thing that kind of pushed people away from
Mm.
giving that any support because it does seem like something in a highly politicized environment to be a kind of middle finger to people with whom they disagree. So maybe that's just me reading in my own personal beliefs into the result, but it did seem rather snubbed after all that attention.
Yeah, I mean it is somewhat unusual. I think it would have been more unusual if it got nothing. If it had gotten nothing, then I would have said those tweets destroyed that movie and they
Mm.
knee-jerk reaction pulled some stuff away. Because to go in with 13 and get not one, that's rough. That doesn't happen very often. You have so many chances, like the odds are just in your favor that you would get something at least. But I mean, this was like kind of a historic year when you really break it down.
Should have been more
Yeah,
historic with Dune winning. So
Agreed. Yeah, it's kind of odd too, I guess, because even though some of its nomination like the 13 is inflated, but the 10 is not,
mm,
right? Like those extra 3 is like the bonus in song and then the international feature grab. There's and then like best picture is like obvious. So some things like that. But some of the other ones, like, the editors supported it on some level and the sound people did and the makeup and you're looking at the larger consensus of the Oscars and like when you get those nominations, when you get so many, it's clear that you had voter bases just all over the map with their branches. So it is a little bit curious how it wasn't like that much. But I've had it happen in my own award show. I mean, even just recently we've in the background been figuring out our ballot. And there's like one game in particular that's like literally on everybody's list, always like over and over and over, but it's always like ranked third or sometimes even fourth. It's very rarely in like one or two. So it's showing up with a lot of nominations, but no one's really saying it should win anything yet. And that will be an interesting conversation when we get there, be like, "Hey, does this actually need to win something or what?" So, it could be something like that where they felt like it deserved to be there but didn't deserve to win. And I don't know. I think maybe the LA fires played a role as well. I think the voter turnout for like the nominees was particularly low. And then when they saw Amelia Perez was up there and was hearing about the drama, they went and watched it, and a lot of them were like, "Well, this is stupid," and then voted against it. Because I mean, you have such a huge number of people. I mean, it's like almost 10,000 people.
wow.
Like, what are the odds that they all just adore Amelia Perez, like a wacko movie that's like super niche? Like it's too, and I'm like, you could blame the Oscars for picking the Green Book style milk toast movie. that everybody like that's like just like relatively inoffensive but boring. That does happen. But like at the same time, like it should have been doing more if they were really committed to thinking it was like a great movie, you know?
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so then I'm gonna do one more point and then we'll close it out.
Okay.
Um, there's a couple of films here that I thought had really interesting endings that either made or broke the film. Um,
Yeah.
Three of which come to mind immediately. So we'll start with Anora, because Anora, despite its wavering and kind of winding storytelling, has an ending that really kind of solidifies and cements it. So I've been
Mhm.
hearing a lot of opinions about that film, by the way, and its content and subject matter, and then specifically their speeches at the Oscars. I'm gonna ignore all that stuff. Watch our evaluation of the film if you want. It's on the channel. We did a review. Um, but I think artistically, it did have merit in the way that it ended, and the ending was actually what made the movie good. Um, Whatever you
Yeah.
call good. I have moral qualms with the film myself, but on that level, I think that it tied it in a nice bow at the end for what it was. The other one that I thought was an interesting contrast was Substance. Um, and I'll share an anecdote here in a second about the ending of that film. And then the last one that I had was Conclave. Conclave
Okay.
had such a milk toast, boring, slow pace that it got to the end and takes this hardcore turn. We did a review on that one as well. Hardcore turn that just it turned the movie into something that it hadn't been building to. And so it just kind of left you
Mhm.
confused and wanting like, so is this supposed to be preachy the whole time, or is this just the where they decided to insert this weird message? It's a very strange way to end the film. Not only did it not satisfy what it was building to, but it also went in a different direction than I'm all for subverting expectations here, obviously, but it was too much of a leap. It disconnected from the
Yeah.
story. And I would say the same thing for Substance, but I'll let you comment on Nora. I'll share the anecdote with Substance and then Conclave. I mean, we don't really have to go over Conclave again if you don't want to, but
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and I also wanna talk about the Emilia Perez ending because that's a pretty,
oh yeah, we
horrible
forgot to
conclusion as
mention that.
well.
That's right.
Yeah, we never talked about it in our review because we were just, like, so, like, dumbfounded and, like, miserable and upset, and it was very hard to, like, talk about that movie because there was just so much bad to shift through. But, yeah, like, the Anora ending, is it's weird how, like, mixed people are because I have heard some people don't like the ending or think it's stupid or think it ruins the movie. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're just flat out wrong, like, that ending I'm with you, Tyler, like, that ending solidifies the whole movie because I think you said this in our actual review of it, you said, like, that's where it brought in the consequences of what everything had been happening in the whole movie. So it validated like the emotional implications of the actions in the movie that we were witnessing. So if you're just watching it going like, this is just like glamorized, it's just like glorifying like sex worker life or whatever. It's like, did you watch the ending? Because the whole point of the ending was to provide a reflective window on that among many other subjects that the film brings up. So it is one of those things where yeah, it's like how much does an ending go like too far? And I feel like Anora's ending, by like extreme contrast to these other movies we're talking about, Anora's ending really lands because it's not preachy. It does the opposite of Conclave, where Conclave is like, bam, it hits you over the head and says, this movie is political now and it's about this subject. Deal with it. And you're like, why? You should have brought that up earlier if you wanted
Right.
to talk about it. Um, and it's not, like, horribly unearned like Amelia Perez, where it's like it wants you to take a crazy interpretation that doesn't make sense given the context of what you've seen. And it's also not like Substance where they forget, like, the style of the way the movie needs to be made. So, when you get to Honora and it's just like it perfectly is in keeping with everything we've seen so far, and then it just closes it out and leaves the rest to your imagination. It's like it just provides that window into humanity that all great art should try to do. So yeah, the ending to Honora is great and is probably a good reason why it did so well. And uh that's well deserved. That's where that merit comes in.
So I've heard a common complaint among it's specifically political commentators that seem to have a problem with the fact that it is glorifying sex workers, and then they make speeches when they go up on stage, like thank you to the sex workers that helped me with whatever, and you
Sure.
know, um, here's the one thing that I'll say against that point is that yes, I disagree with the morality that surrounds that type of work and how destructive it can be. But I don't think the film necessarily is just trying to um, glorify it. It does provide a lot of nuance, and I think like what Mitch was saying is that
Yeah.
ending really kind of it gives you a window into I don't know how real that can be, and so it's too simplistic to just. And I think that applies to the director and Mikey also too simplistic to just lay it at the feet of sex work. I think that it was saying something more, and I think and for the commentators that disagree with it, I think it's too simplistic of a critique as well. I think it dealt with other human issues that, if you're willing to watch it and wade through some of the stuff, because I think it was extreme. Like, it was like, I do not need this much nudity and sexual content to understand the point you're making. But that's a personal opinion, right? Like that's based off of my own morals. And so whether or not you agree with that opinion, I think that the movie itself did have something more to say than just glorifying sex work. And at the end, it did say something about the deeper desires of people, especially in that industry, and what that could look like if, they achieved it. Because she wants to get married. She meets this guy that sweeps her off her feet, and he ends up not being what he looks to be, and then finds the real prince later. And then, with that
Mm.
ending solidifying how that looks, it doesn't deal with everything that comes afterwards, but at least it provides you a window into how this could happen potentially. And so I don't think that it necessarily denigrated or uplifted. I think it just showed. And
Yeah.
for what it's worth, I think that's important. So all that to say,
I think that's interesting too because I was watching an interview with Sean Baker and just like the way he describes his thought process when he's like designing a picture, he kept like routinely going back to this total attitude of like you just let the viewer take what they will from it and you just show people with all their little idiosyncrasies. He's like, everybody has problems, everybody has struggles, and we just want to humanize everybody on screen for what it is, and then that's it. That's the end. And like he was talking about how one of the characters, like one of the handler characters, is actually like trying to get over being alcoholic, and like that's never discussed at any point in the movie. But when you see him at the New Year's Eve party, everybody's drinking alcohol, and he has a cup of water. And so that was a detail that they made sure to add in because like later on he has to drink some alcohol or whatever because he's in so much pain because he gets his nose broken or whatever. And so he like kind of relapses because of that encounter. And it's like this really small, subtle, like sub narrative that really isn't that important, but you could see how like just as his whole pedagogy for how to construct his story is just like, well, I'm just here to direct the actors on screen and to put the picture together so that there's something substantive throughout and that's it. That's the end. And even in his screenplay too, like to the ending, we go back to like that final moment is really important, but also like the scene right before it is really relevant where there's this really interesting discourse about like how men and women perceive one another and the things that they say and the things that they do and how in a lot of cases it's really just unfair and ungrounded and it's all based on your previous experiences with other people and that's it's like you're bringing that to the new person you encounter and that's not really a fair or just thing to do to them who have unique circumstances of their own that can't necessarily be applied. So yeah, I felt like and that's why partly why I think Anora is a great win because I think Anora will prompt these really good, thoughtful conversations. I mean, initially people were just talking about how it was like a dissertation on classism in America. And I was like, "Pff, whatever. I didn't care about that subtext. Like I got it, but it just wasn't that interesting. I've seen enough class-based movies. But if like someone wants to take that, just go for it. And it's like if the movie has that much range to talk about so much, doesn't that make it a great picture? Doesn't that make it a great reflection on our time? So yeah, I'm with you. Anora is a great win. I will die on that hill.
All that said, Dune 2 still should have won. Okay, so let's jump into
Sure.
substance then. So I had a friend, and I'm not going to mention any names here. He is in a relationship
You have
with,
insider knowledge.
sure, we'll call it that. Um, he dates someone who regularly provides commentary on horror films. Let's just go there. We'll make it as vague as possible. So,
Okay.
unsubstantiated. These are not things that I have been privy to. This is, we'll call it hearsay. She told him, he told me. But these are things that she's apparently heard from inside the industry. That is as far as I'll go with the details. Apparently,
Okay.
Substance was shopped around quite a bit, um, including to a company called A24, which when I saw Substance, I was like, this seems like an A24 film. This
Yeah, it
seems
does.
like if there was a formula for A24, this feels like it would be it. Um, but apparently a number of these companies, including A24, said no specifically because of the ending and
Interesting.
the director writer, I forget her name. It's a strange one.
Orly Fargay, I think.
Coraline or yeah, Fargay, that's right. Yeah. Um, said no. I will keep the ending. So the ending stayed in by her prompting. So, um,
Hmm.
I will say I like the fact that the artists got to keep their piece intact. Their vision is what you see on screen. I like that. I don't agree with her. I don't like the last bit of that film. I think that it turns it into something it was not. But it's not my piece. So I like like I said, I like the fact that she got to keep her creation intact the way that she wanted it. I think that that's deserved, and I think that that's an artistic philosophy that should be upheld within film or anything really. Um, but again, I do not like the ending myself. I think that it shifts the movie and actually drops it down a letter grade or two. And again, we've talked about that in our review, but it's strange.
I looked this up too, like to see more reviewers talk about it, and this is actually a very common criticism. What was happening is that the rest of the movie was good enough that people didn't feel like they wanted to just like not give it a positive response based solely on its ending. Um, but it was a common critique that I saw over and over and over was that like, the ending is just kind of too much. There's a few people who felt like they got it, but not enough of a consensus. And that is interesting because the ending is just it has no class. It just sort of like devolves into like complete debauchery for no reason. And you can make interpretations. I think we said this too. The SparkNotes version is like you can make an interpretation from it, but the incentive is just really low now because the
Right.
style in which you've presented it is not of the same caliber of as the rest of your work. So it doesn't match. And then you just think to yourself that you're just doing this for your own personal satisfaction rather than for what's best for the art.
Well,
I
what
mean, I
seems to
kind of
be
I'm a
it seems to be a
good.
lot more thoughtfully satirical throughout the whole film, and then the ending is so aggressive and in your face that then you're left struggling with like, well, the rest of this film was really thoughtful. So does this have some kind of deeper meaning, or is this just as in your face as it looks? And
Yeah.
and so you're left with a bit of confusion, but also the fact that it has such a different style and tone than the rest of the film had had that I think it just leaves you kind of wanting rather than satisfied.
It does. I think I'm a little bit more mixed too about this idea of, you know, uh, like, yeah, I want to support the artist and like let her have the ending that she wants or she thinks is best. But at the same time, it's like every artist has good and bad influences on them, and sometimes someone makes a suggestion that's really actually quite good, and it's a matter of getting the artist to recognize that. And if she's not budging on this ending after multiple upon multiple people saying this is not a good ending, it doesn't work, and now we have the results of most people in agreement saying this is a bad ending, it's like she's sort of forgiven, but it hasn't been forgotten that that was still not an appropriate way to conclude the story. And I feel like that's somewhere where her point was is I don't want to do the appropriate or expected thing of me. I want to do something that's just like blah, vaunting my feelings, but I don't know, it's like it's kinda not about you, and I guess that's the other part of being an artist, like, just because you're an artist, like, you could do your craft, sure, but there should be, s like, a part of that is like, you can do it poorly just because you have the skill for it does not mean you can't devolve and, compose it. Like, I could sit down right now and just write a bad story about, like, oh, it's like, "Oh, once upon a time there was a dog, he threw up and then died," the end. Like, I could write that right now, and that would be a crappy story, and everybody would agree that it's a crappy
Is there a
story,
sequel to that?
even though I'm a decent writer. You know what I mean? Like, I have to still work, and it is my work to try to, like, make my art good. So if someone has a suggestion that's worth considering, it's like the onus is on me to actually consider that and take that to heart. So I kind of feel like if she got pushback, it's probably for a reason. You know what I mean?
Fair. I would tend to agree with the pushback personally. I do like
Same.
there were
Well, because even like, because I was going to say, like, the people who just dislike Anora's ending, I don't know what their gimmick is, but it's not very many people is the thing.
hmm,
It's kind of like,
seems to be
um,
shifted the other way. Kind of an opposite
yeah,
response. Gotcha.
yeah,
Agreed. So yeah, small commentary about endings, but considering some of these films this year really seem to have ones that like it was a make or break type of situation. I think that Nora's ending makes it, and I think the Substance movie kind of breaks it. That was my opinion. But again, see our reviews for both of
agreed.
those films. Same with Conclave, by the way. But I
Yeah.
think Conclave was just didn't have enough going for it. I think the one
Conclave was
good.
I was just about to say Conclave was trying to be faithful to the book's ending, I think. So
Yeah,
that's a little bit of a different
and
scenario.
they
And
are
but that's
constricted
still it's
there.
still a problem with the ending with the book.
But yeah, it's an artistic problem at that point of what the merit is from the source material. But I will say, of these ones, Conclave seemed to have the more interesting set design, which they went into a little bit more in the Oscars. They showed a lot of how they built some of this stuff. That part was interesting. This is an aside, little weird anecdote, but they built quite a bit of
Yeah.
like the churches and stuff and the rooms that they were in. They were all built from the ground up. That was cool. I thought they filmed in an actual church. So, but random
Yeah.
anecdote.
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah. Do you have any further thoughts? Any closing thoughts about this year, the 2025 Oscar? Oh,
Well, we're probably
I
not
have a
gonna have much of a
question.
chance
I
to
have a
talk.
question. Is this
Yeah.
the 2024 Oscars or the 2025 Oscars? Because the Oscars are handed in 2025, but it's for the
Yeah.
2024 films.
It's the 2025 Oscars. It's very annoying because I do that too, because it's all the movies from
Right.
24. I would personally just call it the 2024 Oscars. Like, who cares what date it's on? It's for the movies from the previous year. Like, those are the ones that qualify, so that's what it's about. Like, as a matter of historical record, that's what it's concerned with. But like in terms of the event that took place in reality, it's in 25, so they
Got
have
it.
to put that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's always off.
I was like making the
Yeah, I was just gonna
thumbnail and I was
say,
like, which year do I put here? Is everyone gonna get confused?
yeah. The other thing is because we're probably not gonna, or at least we're certainly not gonna want to revisit and talk about Emilia Perez ever again. Um,
We'll do that once a year.
but the thing
Stay
with
tuned.
that movie's ending, to go back into it, if you've not seen Emilia Perez, you should watch our review and you should
That's
not
it.
watch the movie because it's really awful.
You know what we
But the
should do
movie
next year
itself,
or the year
yeah.
after or potentially in the future? Who knows? We'll MST3K Amelia Perez.
Oh my
This will
gosh,
include a drinking game.
that would be fun. Jeez,
Some
we're
strong
gonna be
alcohol.
blackout drunk by the end.
How many times did I
Water mine
sigh during
down
the
so I can
movie?
make it.
Yeah, shot for every sigh I make. That would be a rough game. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Brutal. Um, yeah, so in that movie, this is about like it's like you have this I feel like I have to reestablish it a little bit. It's a Mexican cartel boss who then decides he wants to be a woman. So he fakes his own death and sends his family away and they're all sad and upset and crying. And then he transforms into a woman, gets surgeries and stuff. And then like starts this new life as Emilia Perez, but then throughout the course of that, decides to like maybe I'll undo some of the things I did wrong. And you know what would be great for all of the families whose like people I killed as a cartel boss? I should dig up their bodies where I buried them and give it back to the families. I think that's the right call.
That's how you become a
So
philanthropist, right? That's
exactly,
I could be a
precisely.
philanthropist. I think I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I'm gonna become a
Just
serial
kill
killer.
someone and then give that person back to their family.
You gotta leave them missing for a while. Really, really let it sink in, let it hurt, and then you give the body
Right,
back.
so it means more when they're
Exactly.
brought back.
I got dark, sorry.
Gee. Oh my god.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so throughout the course of the movie, she does that, and everybody's just like, "Wow, Emilia Perez, you're so great. You're like, finding, our lost loved ones. Like, this is so amazing." And
No
then
one
when
they should have had, like, an investigator. No one's like, "How are you finding all these people?" Like, nobody asked that
I know.
question. Like,
Yeah, it's
"Wait a
like
minute.
really odd how you happen to know everybody who was
This
killed
is a, like,
by this mob
100%
boss.
success rate. How
Hmm.
are you doing this?" Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so they do that, and then what happens is you get to the end and it gets super melodramatic in the end, like really, really melodramatic. Like this is like crash levels of just like, "Ah,"
"I
like
always
just like
loved
way
you.
too much.
I've been
Nobody can get on board with
I'm
this.
your husband.
Hokey.
I didn't know. Oh. Oh, no."
Yeah, how could you not know? Anyways, so she didn't know, and then she finds out, and then she feels bad, and then they're driving in a car, and then there's like a conflict, and they drive off the road, and the car crashes and blows up, and they die.
Best part of the movie.
And then that happens in the movie, which is a shame because they were about to do like a Mexican cartel shootout, and that would have been awesome. We could have had something. I would have wanted them to see the musical number in that, like they're singing as like people are getting shot, like that for me actually would have
Go
helped the
out in
movie
a
a little bit
Last
because then I would have been
Samurai
like,
type of way.
yeah, well, I would have been able to take like, okay, so you are aware of how ridiculously tone deaf and over the top this is. But yeah, anyways, I digress. So they go for this milk toast ending where they just drive off a cliff and die. And then after that point, there's like this walk, this memorial walk that everybody's doing. And they have like her coffin or something for Amelia Perez or whatever, and everybody's like sad and crying. They're like mourning this person. And it's like, you're telling me this is basically if Mexico was gonna mourn, like, the death of Pablo Escobar. Like, the guy was a monster. What
Yeah,
are you
but
talking about?
Pablo
And that's how the movie
Escobar
conveys it. It's like, you should feel bad for Amelia Perez. It's like, I'm not gonna feel bad for her, she's a monster.
well, that's if Pablo Escobar became a woman, because then he's different, and now we praise who he is, not who he was. That's
But
that's the
he
message.
murdered millions of people.
It
Maybe
doesn't
not millions.
matter.
You get the
He's
point.
he's in a
Yeah.
dress now, we're good. Now he is different.
Because Perez, like, literally murders, like, tons and tons of people, and, like, she says, like, "Oh, well, that, like, wasn't me," or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter if you think it wasn't you.
Right.
Those people are still dead.
Right? Same hands, same ones that shot all those people, the same person who told those people to kill. It's yeah, it was so many leaps, and they're, like, carrying a statue and stuff. I was like, "This is this is really sick. This is" oh my gosh. Tone deaf is a good word. That should be the movie's title. Tone deaf the movie.
Yeah. This movie, Perez, like, really illuminated for me, like, why people hate the Oscars. Like, if you're one of those people who hates the Oscars, like, I get it now because it's a movies like Amelia Perez get in there and you see it and you go, "Man, you just seem like a pretentious a-hole." Like, I can't imagine. And, like, obviously, the filmmakers, you'd like to think that they had the best of intentions, but what comes through in the film is clearly not that.
Sure.
So, it sorta doesn't matter at that point, you're at the whims of how people react to stories.
At some point, maybe we could do a follow-up where we can try our best to evaluate what those intentions may have been. Because I tried thinking about it for a while, and I was like, there's no intention that would have led me to that outcome that seems like a good intention. This is not a well thought out artistic way of expressing this journey for anybody. Trans or not, like
Yeah.
it's just it didn't make any sense to like apply. It didn't have any good intentions behind it, or at least it really does not seem that way. I cannot dig far enough to figure it out.
Yeah, some people were that I heard who liked it were saying something about how it felt like it was like a bit. like, they kept using like, describing it as almost as if it's like a cartoon where, like, in a cartoon, like, an anvil falls on someone and then it just rolls off their head and then they're fine. And, obviously, that doesn't make sense to us, but in a cartoon, we believe it more, and that's where, like, the musical stuff comes in, is to, like, clue you in as to, like, it's not real, it's just kind of this, like, ridiculous fantasy version of it. Um, and they must have been attached to, like, the emotional moments that hit, and then you go back to these broad stroke flares, but I just I just can't get there with them. I just really can't. When they did that in Chicago, because Chicago's like that too. A lot of musicals are like this, where they give you this like concentrated dose of like an emotional experience with a character, and then they just do a song that's just like the larger image of it, and it's not really like it's not nearly as nuanced. But like in Chicago, when it did that, the storytelling was a little more simple and streamlined, so it was much easier to grasp. Like, oh, this is like a terrible human being. That's what this is. And the movie's like, yep. And then moving on. And it's like, oh, this person's very manipulative. And then you're like, oh, gotcha. And so you just kind of see, and then it's like, oh, look how this person is getting the shaft because everybody else is just so mean in this like, overpopulous, like what is it like the glamour, the high society types,
Mm.
right? So the moral message or the meaning of it comes through just fine, and then you're fine like going through the songs in which it's depicting all these characters. So that was an instance where I'm like, yeah, that works for me. That works, I think, for a lot of people. With the Perez one, it just felt like it was asking so much. But I also am just genuinely confused by the dialogue in places. Like, I genuinely don't understand like where the weird reversal is because it's like they reversed a lot of things. They're like he's a cartel boss, but he's cool, or he's like a good person, and you're like,
He's a good dad.
what?
To his own kids,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
like a
To
good
other
dad.
people's kids, though, they die. They all die. We kill them all.
Yeah, it's like you want to say like, oh, is this a commentary on like how certain characters shouldn't be humanized because like like the orcs from Rings of Power, how they try to humanize them, and it's like this is so stupid. Like they're just monsters. They
Right.
were always been that way. That makes no
Their
sense.
existence
They
is
don't have
is
families. That's not how they're
satirical in
born.
nature. It's supposed to represent something more. It's not supposed to be a nuanced take. It's supposed to be
Right.
just evil, like with Nosferatu.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I kind of wonder like if that's what they were trying to do, but the messaging, like what they associated it with was just seemed like weird choices to make that
Yeah.
work.
There's a lot of ways you could have done this a lot better. Namely, all of them. Maybe not threatening
Yeah.
someone to get your medical procedure done. That's where we'd start, probably. Not killing hundreds of people.
Yeah.
That would be another one. Not abandoning your family. Probably another good one.
Even as a comedy, I mean, no offense if you got Amelia Perez, but if you did, tell us why, because I didn't get it. It just seemed horribly offensive.
Yeah, like I said in a previous video, if you have two solid, thoughtful points, put them down below in the comments section. Tell me why, and then we'll have you on the show. I want to hear your opinion. We'll debate it out. I don't think that's gonna happen, but invitation's open.
Speaking of endings, though, you could argue that Dune 2 ends on a cliffhanger, and that potentially works against it. Now, I feel like, and I think most people agree that Dune 2's ending is so cataclysmically good with like what it's trying to resolve that just because it's open for what happens next, it doesn't really hurt it in the way that like middle entries can sometimes do. Because in like at the end of like Empire Strikes Back, it's very like, oh man, like Vader's still out there. We got the Emperor to deal with. Like, there's still a lot of balls in the air. So we really need that third movie to like set everything to rest. But with Dune, it's not like that because Dune is like, okay, the Holy War started, which is the very thing we were trying to not have happen. And now it's here. And it's like, oh, and then there's the tragedy and then it ends. I'm like, you don't really need much more else after a tragedy.
It's also
So
an interesting commentary on the fact that the very thing that you're trying to avoid may be the one thing that comes to pass because it's inevitable. And that's the
yeah.
commentary throughout the film is that he's trying to avoid it, but in avoiding it makes it come to pass. So it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, which is the theme of the film. The Messiah figure and the, transcending time and transcending our limitations as humans, and now it leads to catastrophe. And so ending on catastrophe, the very thing they were trying to avoid, is the thing that is a crescendo. And it may be that, yeah, you don't get to see like whether Paul becomes emperor or how his relationship with the emperor daughter goes, or how I still prefer to say Cheney, but we'll call it Chani. How his relationship with Chani resolves. Like these are all questions that are kind of left in the air, but it's artistic in value to leave it up to interpretation of the viewer, because that viewer has enough information
Mhm.
to kind of lead to your own conclusions, and they're all just as valid as whatever Denis might have put on the screen. You'll obviously see Dune Messiah, but Dune Messiah has a big old jump. It jumps into the future quite a bit, and it's not a direct. It's not like Dune 1 and Dune 2. It's now there's a big time jump, and a lot of things have happened before that starts. I don't know what Denis is going to do with his creative license, but it still is not a perfect. It's not like Return of the Jedi resolving everything from Empire. It's a new chapter essentially of the story of Dune.
Mhm.
Anyway, all that to say, I think that that was a more artistic way to end that film rather than spoon feeding you whatever result you wanted.
Right.
So, anyway, Dune 2 was snubbed. That is the main point of this video. Should have won, should have swept. Hopefully Messiah comes through and just knocks everything out of the park when it's out, but we'll see.
That is the hope. Yeah, because I mean, it's really hard to like, I get the people who want Dune 2, such as yourself, to win, but, like, a part of me would just be really bummed because it's like, if it won, then I'm like, so does Denis just get completely forgotten about after this point as a result? It'd be like, "Ah, well, he won." You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want that. It's like, I want him to get Best Director. I wanted to have a screenplay nomination with Best Picture, and I wanted to get the whole
I don't see that
smorgasbord.
as
I
like
want it to be
a
like Return of the King.
that's not an end though. It's just a single award out of the man has a long and storied career ahead of him. Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere despite whether he makes the Oscar list or not.
Well, I'm being practical though. I mean, we've got a sci-fi movie director here. It's like it's hard for them to even get nominated,
He's made it
as we
this
could
far.
clearly see,
He's made it this far.
you know?
I don't think your concerns are valid. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, the other thing too is like I would rather just so assuming like Doom Messiah is great and assuming that can do a big sweep, then yeah, like the hindsight of 2020 says Anora should win. But like if that can't happen, then yeah, I'll be more mad about it at that point.
Anora 2 comes out and beats it, like, dang it, again. Please don't make Anora
He's
2.
like the
That is
Godfather. No, he's not doing that. He's
yeah,
gonna do something else.
definitely not.
But that would be really funny.
I will say on that point, just as kind of a finisher here, we'll wrap it up. Um, Probably the main thing that I liked about Honora winning was that it was an indie film. I think that more indie films
Yeah.
should have some more attention. I like the fact that I wouldn't have chose Honora personally, but I don't have other indie films that I would have placed in its stead. So the fact that it is an indie film that it got that attention is cool. It might be a turning point for, you know, some of these other people that haven't historically gotten a chance to now have a chance. So, regardless of what other
Yeah.
opinions you have, it may have paved a way for these other people who deserve to be recognized.
Yeah, that's one thing that actually I noted in Sean Baker's one of his many speeches is that he talked about independent filmmaking and he also talked about how he kind of like targeted big publishers too and was like, about the excessive spending and like
Yep.
how to like properly negotiate some of that and he sort of presented them with a challenge and just him winning standing up on that stage with this like $6 million budget movie taking the best picture of the year award that sends a pretty strong message and it's really interesting how just last year Oppenheimer won and that was like this huge expensive project
Right.
so and I feel like it's cool that the Oscars can do both and I like that the tides go up and down like that and it doesn't have to always go down to the same type of movie all the time. I mean, we want to complain about how they pick very conventional things, and they do oftentimes. But like sometimes, like you're saying, like the externals of what the film is and what it represents, or like giving Sean Baker some extra awards because of like his larger body of work, which he's been a huge proponent for independent films and movie theaters and um like, apparently he's, like, a big supporter of, like, other independent films makers and helping them get started and stuff. So I'm like, okay, so, like, it's someone who's, like, actively involved in all of this stuff, and that can carry more weight for the voters, and if it bothers you on merit, it's like it doesn't really matter if the merit's good, in my opinion.
Mm.
Like, if you have 5 nominees and they're all great, it really shouldn't, like, matter so much, like, the nuances of the story, because that's just always gonna be subjective, and at that point, it's just more relevant to look at, like, external factors that might be important for, like, the larger cultural context.
Yeah, like tweets.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we'll
Yeah.
see that how I wrapped it back around. I think we'll I think we'll call it there. Any further thoughts? Any closing?
Thanks for letting me drag you through the Oscar season with me.
It was a good experience. We'll try and make it an annual thing, along with watching Amelia Perez. Thank you for joining.